If you're in your late 30s, 40s, and maybe even 50s, I wonder if you've experienced this. It seems like when you hit that sort of early middle age, that the things that used to work for you in the past, the things that made you successful, all of a sudden, either you got a new job, or maybe you're in a new relationship, or you got a divorce, something, life happens. And about this age, you start to realize that the things that used to work for you don't anymore. You're getting feedback maybe at work that you need to change some way that you usually show up. Or maybe in a relationship, you're starting to get feedback, or you're starting to understand that you want something different out of the relationship than maybe you've wanted before. Well, don't worry, because I've experienced the same thing, and so have millions of other people. It's just part of the development process for us human beings here on Earth. Hi, I'm Beth Strathman. Welcome back to my channel. We're devoted to your personal growth and development. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, be sure to do so and hit the bell so that you have notifications of whenever I upload a new video. So what's going on here in sort of late 30s, 40s, and maybe even into your 50s? Yeah, sometimes people have referred to this age when people have midlife crisis. And maybe that's what it is, who knows? But there is an idea that's been around for eons. Ancient cultures believe this, and certainly Carl Jung noted it, where in the first half of your life, you go out and conquer the world. You're making your mark in the world. You're showing people what you can do. And in the second half of life, you end up needing to conquer yourself in some way. Carl Jung put it this way. He, of course, was the noted psychoanalyst of the mid-20th century, protege of Freud. And he said, the first half of life is devoted to forming a healthy ego. The second half is going inward and letting go of it. So on a mythological level, or an ancient wisdom level, and a psychological level, there is something happening. We're transitioning into a second half of life where we really need to do more introspection so that we can look at ourselves and see if we can let go of pieces of our ego that aren't working for us anymore. They may have worked for us when we were younger, but they're not working for us anymore. Let go of those and get back in touch with more of authentically who you were before you built those ego behaviors that were masking your authentic self. So in the first half of my life, I definitely can see from childhood up into, like I said, maybe late 30s, early 40s, that, it's really about proving yourself, gaining skills, making your mark in the world, right? Using your brain or your artistic creativity, whatever your skills are, to really go out there and show people or show the world what you can do. And to really start to increasingly, whether it's climb the corporate ladder or in some way, shape, or form in the profession that you chose, to continually get more and more status in that profession. So, not only in school did we learn the ins and outs of, learning knowledge that we're going to need in the world, presumably. But also, in early childhood, we start to adopt a persona and different personality traits just so we can maintain attachments with our family, with our caregivers, and so that they can help us survive. This happens from the time when we're very small infants, right? Where we start to ignore our own instincts and to sort of mold ourselves in the fashion that our parents want us to be, or we think our parents want us to be, and or what society says we should be. So as a kid, I was, a protector. I assumed that role, or caregiver. I took care of my younger brothers and sisters from time to time to help out my parents. I was also a good student, even to a degree a perfectionist. All these things, all these roles I assumed to become who I thought I needed to be in the world, to either maintain, good relationships with my parents, and or to do what I thought society wanted me to do. And certainly by becoming all this kind of a person, I got reinforcement at school. I got reinforcement in jobs when I was in my 20s and into my 30s. So I thought, okay, I've got this figured out. And really, in this first half of life, it is about becoming successful in some way, shape, or form, however you define success. So, I went into a career in teaching out of college, and that was something I did want to do, I think in part because I enjoyed school so much, but it was also at the time I was in college, it was an acceptable career for a woman to go into. At the time I was in college, things were just starting to change for women. Careers were opening up for them. So I had always set my sight on being a teacher, so I did that. And then after doing that for a while, I just felt like there was something in the world that I wanted to do more. And I'd always been interested in the law. And so I decided to go back to school and go to law school, which I did. And did pretty well in law school, but learned that I didn't really love it. But I was glad that I got the education. Again, it was just more working on my intellect, right? The intellect is the part of the brain that helps protect the ego, for example. So I was still very much in my ego. And instead of going, and becoming an actual attorney, although I passed the bar, I did go into human resources, which uses a lot of employment law. So I had a career in human resources. And through that, I interfaced a lot with executives and managers and saw the difficulties that they had relating to their employees and just those interpersonal skills. So eventually I became a leadership coach. As I look at my work as a leadership coach, which I really enjoyed, it was a way for me to do something that I felt was legitimate and was a high status, I guess, role. A role that might have, even though I might have not had a lot of power because I wasn't a really powerful person, didn't run a 500 person corporation or anything like that, or a 1,000,000 person corporation. But I was working with people who worked in large organizations and had a lot of responsibility. So maybe that was my way of staying connected to power, which seemed like it was an important thing, power and status, right? Isn't that what we're sort of trained to think we need, is to, like I said before, climb that corporate ladder or, increase our status throughout our career. But then a funny thing happened. Not only was, beginning probably in my mid to late 40s, I started getting feedback at work that, was like there was some ways I was coming across that I needed to change, which, okay, that's fine. But it was kind of a different experience for me because I'd never gotten that feedback before. It just seemed to where is this coming from, right? Used to be fine, now it's not. And it really boiled down to a different organization had different culture, its own organizational culture had different expectations. So that's one thing to think about too. When you get into that time where you're moving up the corporate ladder and you get different responsibilities, inevitably those responsibilities involve more people interaction. And that often is what trips people up. So when I went out and started coaching, it was good because not only was I learning skills for myself, but then I could pass those on to my clients. But then probably about 3 or 4 years ago, I had a serious illness, followed by another serious illness a couple of years later in 2021. And so through these illnesses, it gave me time to really reflect and think what I really wanted to do. And although I didn't really want to change a lot about my life, there were some tweaks that I wanted to make. And so this, to me, was where I was moving, looking at that second half of life and starting to, as Jung said, dismantle the ego that I had spent my first half of life building up. So during this time, through the illnesses where I had a little extra time to kind of reflect on things as I was recuperating, I realized, excuse me, that I wanted to use, I'd always been in my left brain, logical, analytical mind, and I'd often ignored, my intuition. You know how that is, you think, oh, I kind of have an inkling that I should do this, like take some money out of this account or reinvest in this or whatever it was. And I had ignored, you know how it is when you ignore that, and then by golly, come to find out, and a few months later you realize you should have followed your intuition. Well, I had done that too, so I wanted to follow my intuition a little more. I'd also always wanted to work more with women, so I wanted to move from, focusing on just general people in leadership positions to working more with women, and perhaps working with women who weren't in leadership positions. And I had always been interested in different things like astrology, psychology, mythology, philosophy, and even, you might be interested too in some of the findings that they have in quantum field theory. So I thought, well, gee, how can I kind of weave some of that stuff into the way I work with women, if that's what I want to do going forward, and still keeping sort of that personal development aspect of what I was doing with leadership coaching, keep that in the mix. So in short, I realized that I had really been living my life by what society thought I should be doing, and worried about how my family would perceive me if I didn't do this very business-like, logical kind of work. So, I guess I was in that second half of life and really looking at the ego I had developed. And by that I don't mean necessarily a swollen head, but just the persona that I had developed in the first half of life. And now I was really looking at how I was going to let go of pieces of that, how I was going to let go of being in my logical, analytical mind most of the time, how I was going to let go of this idea that for me to be a powerful woman, I had to be working with powerful people, leaders in my case. So that's what I've been working on with myself for the last couple of years. And again, if you're in that age group, late 30s, 40s, maybe even into your 50s, you've probably been having sort of some of these same experiences and thoughts as well. So I guess what I'm experiencing now is really a reconciliation of how to so obviously we hold on to our egos our whole life because they help us navigate the external world, but not to the extent perhaps that we built them up in our earlier life. So how to reconcile using ego and tapping into what people call your authentic self or your higher self a little more. And in fact, having the ego be in service of that authentic self instead of driving everything that you do in life. So that, and reconciling using the use of logic and analysis with also the use of intuition and imagination. So not getting so one-sided in how the aspects of your ability to think, that you can not just rely on logic, you can bring in those other more right-brained areas as well. And really exploring this relationship between the material world and what I'll refer to as the quantum world, the world that quantum physics paints a picture of. I kind of find that fascinating. So how to bring that more into not only my life, but the work that I do. So while I have appreciated the life that I've, led in the first half of my life, sort of building my career, etc., I'm also, I feel pulled, I guess, towards reconnecting with aspects of myself that maybe I had in my childhood, namely the intuition and imagination, and that I've kind of put away or covered up over the years because I was trying to be who I thought I was supposed to be. So that is the idea that I want to convey to you today, that in the first half of your life, you conquer the world. In the second half of your life, you conquer yourself. And if you are at a crossroads, call it a midlife crisis or whatever you want to call it, and you're wondering, wow, what is happening in my life? I just want you to know you're in good company. Everybody goes through it. Some of us pay more attention to it than others, but I think if you do pay attention to it, you really can reap a lot of benefits from it and grow from more of just living out of your persona and grow into becoming more of your authentic self. So, thanks for watching today, and I'll see you next time.